And now it's time for a more lighthearted segment, Tips for Good. So Nathan, why do we do Tips for Good?
Michael, we do Tips for Good every week because high anxiety, you win.
That sounds like a tip for bad. I think we shouldn't do that. Shouldn't give in.
No, it's a reference to a Mel Brooks movie. It was a song that he sang.
I've seen High Anxiety.
You've seen High Anxiety?
Yeah, of course. Mel Brooks. I think I've seen all Mel Brooks movies.
Yeah. I forgot who I was talking to for a second. And you know what? Mel Brooks, you know what he does?
What?
He makes the world a better place.
Have you watched his movies recently?
Has he made any movies recently?
No, not any recent movies. His old movies recently. I watched Blazing Saddles as an adult. Boy, that's an experience.
Well, I mean, considering when it was made, it was progressive at the time.
I don't think saying the N-word that many times can be progressive.
Well,
even if you do it ironically.
The bad guys were the ones that were saying
Very true. Very true.
So at least he was trying to be like, hey, these, fuck these guys. And Gene Wilder's speech about like, you know how we're always talking how there's always that argument of, well, these people, like they're simple country folk. You can't expect them to not be racist. And then he just kind of subverts that trope by like, yeah, morons.
Yeah.
Like I always love that whole thing.
Yeah. Well, you heard it here first, folks. Nathan is fine with white people saying the N-word.
No, he is not. Nathan is. No, they're bad guys if they say it. They're bad guys if they say it. Nathan is not fine with that.
Trapped.
Nathan is not fine with white people saying the N-word.
If only we could edit this, but we're not going to.
Maybe we should.
So tips for good. Okay. Tips for good. Our tip for good today is to be proactive in your trans inclusivity. Basically, we have, generally, if you're not, transphobe or homophobe, you're like probably aware of ways that you can be inclusive of the trans folks in your life. But one thing that it can be easy to overlook if you're not trans or not part of the community, or if you're not like particularly an active ally, is that signaling that acceptance, that inclusivity, proactively is very, very valuable. So doing things like when you introducing yourself along with your pronouns to signal that you are open to and accepting of people with, non-cis, gender identity. Things like asking other people's pronouns. Things like, so taking these measures that sometimes are reactive and turning them into a practice that can proactively signal that you're a safe person to interact with.
Yeah. Like I hadn't really thought much of it in my own class for a long time. And then one of my trans friends who is a teacher, I had a conversation with them, and they heavily encouraged it. And the first year that I did it, there were several people in my class that used pronouns that I wouldn't have automatically guessed. And that's the interesting thing about pronouns. Like 99% of the time, people are probably going to use the pronouns that you assume they're going to use. But like in that 1% of the time when they don't, like it means a lot to people. It means a lot to people to signal that. And in fact, like the year that I started doing that, I got comments on my teacher evaluations that straight up said, at the beginning of the year, he asked everybody to share their pronouns, and that made me feel safe in his class. And as a teacher, like that's really important to me, because like people need to be focused on learning in the class. They shouldn't be focused on, potentially not being safe in who they are.
Yeah, totally.
But in general, like it is good to be able to have people feel safe around you. And, and this isn't just like some bleeding heart shit. Like this isn't bleeding heart liberal shit. This is like, there is a advantage to being around multiple people and to learning who multiple people are.
Yeah.
And, see, everybody has something to offer you. Like everybody has a unique perspective that is different from your own in some way, whether it's based on what they believe, whether it's based on how they grew up, whether it's based on how they view themselves. Like everybody has something interesting, a new perspective that can potentially enrich your view of the world. And if they feel safe talking to you, then they're more likely to share that perspective with you and potentially enrich your own view of the world. That is a good thing. Like diversity isn't a good thing just because, like, you know, we want to make everything like a Disney movie or some shit. Like, it's a good thing because you learn more by interacting with more people. And if you have no interest in interacting with people other than those that fall outside who you are, then fine, ignore this segment. But for the rest of you, differences do matter when it comes to communication. And if you respect those differences, you're more likely to have better communication.
Totally. And it's also just a great example to set for the cis people around you, to remind them to be inclusive and all that stuff. Ultimately, it's hard to overlook the example of like the past several years of the increasing trend of like self-reported trans identity, because even conservatives will be like, oh, I keep seeing more and more people coming out as trans. It's like an epidemic or whatever. And it's like, no, it's more people are comfortable and safe and have received the signal that they will be accepted as a trans person and therefore are okay identifying as one. So it is very important and very powerful to be proactively inclusive.
And honestly, it's even valuable in the cases that they always bring up of, oh, this person's just going through a phase, like they're going to grow. Like, even in the cases in which somebody might be experimenting with different pronouns or whatever, like even in cases like that, giving them the opportunity to explore that and then decide, you know, oh, well, okay, I guess that's not for me. Like there's still value in that. Like there's still value in respecting it, even if it does end up being something that they, you know, that they decide is not them.
Yeah.